Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Twins Talk Arsenal. This is a little bit of a somber episode, I think. We're talking just after Mesut Ozil has finally announced that he has left the club and he's joined Fenerbahce on a 3.5-year deal, bringing to an end 8 years at the Emirates for Mesut Ozil. Yeah, I think this is a bit of a sad situation. It's a sad end to the possibilities which we had when we first signed this guy and the hope that we had of the team that we could kind of build around him. But in the end, I think it was the right decision and it's the right way to go forward for both club and player. What were your first thoughts, Das?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one to talk about. I mean, we signed him at a time, where Arsenal hadn't had world-class players in the team for such a long time. We had got to a stage where ultimately we did have a very mediocre team overall. We had players that delivered in spouts, notably like Fabregas before his move back to Barca, Van Persie, but he was too injury prone. Then he had one good season and then went off to Man United. But we had players that were good for half a season, one season, etc. Ozil was the first player in a very long time that we've bought, which has been very high caliber. Truly world-class player, came from, Real Madrid, played very well there, got so many assists, especially for Ronaldo. He came to Arsenal, there was high hopes, high expectations. It's tough to see him leave after all these years. He came to Arsenal, he definitely delivered, especially in the first half of his career at Arsenal. I mean, it's a sad day. I think he delivered. His first two seasons, we won 2 FA Cups. He gave the club hope again, which I think is probably the biggest accomplishment that you can give him.
Yeah, I think it's important to reflect on what he achieved at Arsenal. I know his last few months weren't great, but when he was on form, when we first signed him, he was one of the best players in the Premier League. And when we first signed him, he represented a shift in Arsenal's transfer policy away from selling our best players to a kind of hopefulness that we can buy the best players in the world and compete with teams at that level. And I think it's kind of down to Arsenal that we didn't put the players around Mesut Ozil. We didn't keep the players that we had around Mesut Ozil, which could have played to his strengths. And in the end, we ended up focusing more on his weaknesses, his inability to run back, work hard, and defend, rather than what he adds to the team. We had the point where we had Sanchez around him. If we had signed a quality striker up front as well, and we had a quality midfield, I think he really could have thrived in his first few seasons at Arsenal. But we failed to keep Sanchez. We failed to build on that. I think the season which we could have won the league, where Leicester won the league, we only made one signing. We signed Petr Cech. And although Petr Cech was a great goalkeeper for us, we failed to build on the team which we had. And then Leicester ended up running away with it, when really that should have been our league. And if we had put the players around Ozil to facilitate that, I think we could have had a great team. So I think there are failings from the player. There are also failings from the club. And yeah, it's sad to see him go without having fulfilled his potential, because we all know what a wonderful player he can be and that he was at Arsenal. So I'm looking forward to seeing him maybe come back to some kind of form at Fenerbahce.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Ozil, he came to Arsenal, there was high hopes, high expectations. He did deliver two FA, or he helped to deliver 2 FA Cups in his
3
first.
FA Cups, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but 2 in the first 2 seasons. I mean, so he came with a bang, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it is a shame. You saw when he first came to Arsenal, you saw what he was capable of. Especially in his second season, where he registered 19 assists for Arsenal. One short of Thierry Henry's record overall for the Premier League. You saw what he was capable of, what he could deliver, and he did that. With ultimately not world-class forwards in front of him when he was at Arsenal. It's a shame that during the latter part of his Arsenal career, he couldn't find that balance, so to speak, with Lacazette, with Aubameyang, because, he delivered all these assists for not world-class players. How would he have fared if he could have been able to deliver these assists for world-class players,
Yeah.
and to create these chances. We saw what he was capable of. He created more chances than any other player since he joined Arsenal. So I think that speaks for itself. Even now, you've got other players kind of just catching up to Ozil's statistics. And this is an Ozil which in the latter part of his career hasn't played for Arsenal, or when he's played, he hasn't played the full matches. And it says a lot that, even though in the latter part of his career, he wasn't starting regularly for Arsenal, you've still got other players who are deemed to be world class, and they're only catching up to him now. So, I think he delivered a lot to Arsenal. He gave a lot to Arsenal, especially in the first part of his career. And yeah, I mean, that's not something to be sniffed at. He brought so much to Arsenal, and he was a world-class player.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans will remember him for the end of his reign at Arsenal, the end of his time here, where he wasn't getting selected by managers, he wasn't favoured. There were rumours of unhappiness in the dressing room, and I think when you remember a player's legacy at a club, you need to remember the whole legacy. And he helped us end our 9-year trophy drought. He brought 2 FA Cups to the Emirates. He played very well. He was a staple part of Arsene Wenger's team for a long time, and he played some amazing football. So he didn't have the best end to the to his time at Arsenal, but he did have many highs along the way. And I think one of the things I really appreciated about the way he's gone today is it seems very dignified. There's no passing shots at the club, there's no passing shots at the manager, and the same from the club towards Ozil as well. And just reading through his letter, which he posted on Twitter, you felt like it was quite emotional. You felt that he did care for the club, and he talked about North London being his home and how accepted he felt by the fans and the community in North London, and how he really wanted to be part of that community, and he's sad to be leaving. And you feel that this is a player which really did love the club. And for all his faults, I think fans loved what he could bring when he was at the very top of his game. So this is a sad way for a great player to be leaving Arsenal.
Yeah, he was a player, he could create something out of nothing. He kind of brought us back to, the era of like Bergkamp and, these types of players. It kind of brought us back to our invincible team where you've got like Pires, Ljungberg, etc. Ozil was that type of player. He could create something out of nothing. He could galvanize the team and get them to play well when they needed him, especially in the first half of his Arsenal career. I think he will definitely be missed. He was a magician. He created that little bit of magic. He did see things that no one else could see. He wasn't always the best defensively, but he more than made up for it from an offensive point of view.
Yeah. It's sad, really. I think towards the end, there are some issues with the player which we kind of need to highlight. I think he was kind of snide at points towards the end. He did make a few digs at the club, and he did things which he kind of hid behind this veil of innocence that he didn't know what he was doing, but he knew that it was kind of undermining the club. So when the club had to make redundancies and, he didn't take that step to cut his wage bill, which he shouldn't have to do. But as the club's highest earner, it's kind of him that needs to lead the way. When we made Gunnosaurus redundant, and then you saw him undermining the club by offering to pay Gunnosaurus's wages, which, is hidden behind a nice gesture, but really, what's he trying to achieve through that? I don't think he's trying to fund a guy's career. I'd like to fund his paycheck. I think Ozil was trying to make a dig at the club. And when he was tweeting out player ratings at the end of matches and acting like a fan, and it's just highlighting his absence, I feel like that's kind of the situation that Ozil got to at the end, which is why I think this is a good move for both the player and the club, because you could tell towards the end that Ozil wasn't happy. And you could tell towards the end that his unhappiness in the dressing room was making other players unhappy and not bringing the kind of unity which Arteta needs to move the club forward. So although he is a great player and there is some missed potential there, I think it's the right decision that this comes to an end. And I think financially, I'm going to be interested to find out more about the terms of the agreement which Arsenal have signed to end his contract, because there will be some payout in there for Ozil. It won't be 100%, but I think you're probably looking at maybe a £5 million payout to the player of the £7 million that he's owed. So I'm interested to see what Arsenal have done to get him off the books. But I guess it's a positive day, even if we did have to take that initial financial hit.
Yeah, I mean, the other points I'd add to that, Ozil had the famous, tweets about China and their treatment of Muslims, etc. We don't know the impact that had behind the scenes on, his ability to be advertised, and also Arsenal's ability to be advertised in general in China.
Yeah.
We don't know whether that impacted his ability to play football on the pitch, whether they didn't want to play him because of external factors, rather than just internal factors and his ability on the pitch. There could have been external factors which ultimately influenced this decision as well, which is a shame. Of course, he's entitled to his opinion, and, he should be able to say what he wants to say and to support whatever cause he wants to support. If he has a view, he should be entitled to say it. So it is a shame if that was the reason why, one of the key reasons behind him having a reduced role in the team, and then also ultimately between him leaving for Fenerbahce.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it goes back to, we can't forget what he brought to the club in his first half of his Arsenal career. He did bring so much to the club, and I think ultimately is something which Arsenal fans would be grateful for. And also the other thing I would probably add is, I think it's tough in the sense that in the latter part of his Arsenal career, he played in an Arsenal team which to an extent was falling behind. He played in an Arsenal team which was no longer able to keep 60, 70% possession each game. So, Arsenal didn't have the control in games which they used to have. And also, when you look at opposition teams, Liverpool, Chelsea, etc., the way that they started to play, I think, they started to play with a very high press, quick forwards, aiming to get into 2-on-2, 3-on-3 situations, quick counter-attacking football. And the issue with Arsenal is that I think they tried to do a similar thing, especially when Emery came in. I know Ljungberg wasn't there for too many games, but when Arteta came in as well, I think they've tried to adapt the way Arsenal have played to try and match that of other top six teams. And, fair enough, for one reason or another, they've tried to match that. But it's been something which Ozil hasn't been able to adapt to. That's not really his style of football. So I think it's been a tough one. It's been hard for him to transition, so to speak, to the new style of football, which, so to speak, modern managers want to play, where you don't need possession to win the game. It probably was highlighted by Leicester winning the league unexpectedly, and it showed that you can play a different type of football. You can play a type of football which is very defensive. You have one or two chances on the counter-attack, and ultimately, if you score them, you can still win the game. I think that template ultimately has led to a change in footballing philosophy, and I think to an extent it has maybe led to, or been one of the key reasons for Ozil losing his place in the Arsenal team as well in recent years.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think football's shifted since we brought Ozil in. We brought Ozil in the height of the kind of Wenger days, where we were primarily focused on possession football to win games. Now you're seeing a lot more counter-attacking, fast-paced teams implementing a high press, which is just not what Ozil is about. And you didn't see any shift from Ozil to try and fit into this new kind of role. I mean, Emery tried to fit him in. You saw Emery play him out on the wing to try and include him, and that's just not his strongest position. That never really worked. I think football's moved on, and Ozil hasn't exactly moved with it, and that's kind of where the contrast has been lately. And also, Arsenal have slipped. Arsenal aren't the all-dominating team which we used to be. And when you do drop down the table and you have to defend more and you have to work harder to win the ball back from opponents, Ozil's not the type of player that is going to give you that work rate. So it's a reflection on football. It's a reflection on where football is and where Arsenal are at the time. I think Ozil just isn't the right fit for Arsenal anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's sad. You know, he did have a great legacy at the club, especially in the first part of his Arsenal career. You know, I do agree with what you said earlier about, you know, although in his first 2 seasons we won 2 FA Cups, you do look at when Leicester won the league, and you do kind of look at that as that could have been the season. I know, you know, it wasn't, you know, Ozil's fault by any stretch of the imagination, but you know, that was the season where I think if we had won the Premier League that season, it would have changed Arsenal's history completely. I think, you know, it would have enabled us to keep players like Sanchez. It would have enabled us to attract better players, which, you know, maybe we weren't able to do for one reason or another, maybe financially. I think that's the big hole, so to speak, where if we'd managed to win that, I think Ozil's legacy would have been better than it is. He would have been held in higher regards, but he still leaves on high regards. He still leaves a legacy at Arsenal. He still achieved a lot and helped to push us back in the right direction when we needed a world-class player to do that.
Yeah, I think moving away from kind of Ozil and personally and the kind of potential which we feel like we lost by losing Ozil at this stage, I think transfer policy-wise, this kind of reflects another problem which Arsenal are having to deal with. We've now had Mesut Ozil leave, who we've agreed to terminate his contract so that he can go. We're receiving no money for him after all the money which we spent to bring him into the club and invest into him. It's the same with Sokratis right now. No money we're receiving for this player. Aaron Ramsey left. We didn't get any money for him. Santi Cazorla left. We didn't get any money for him. Sanchez we got Mkhitaryan for, but that wasn't really a great return. If you look how much we sold Mkhitaryan to Roma for, it's not a great return on this player either. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of pounds, which Arsenal are losing currently because we're letting players either get to the end of their contract or we're not able to sell them for any kind of money. And this is feeding into our financial problems now. This is why we're struggling to buy players. This is why we're having to loan players at the moment, because we're not getting money for our most valuable assets. And Ozil leaving is another situation where he's a highly valued player, a highly known name in the footballing world, and we're not getting anything for him leaving the club. I think this is something which we've been promised wouldn't happen again. It is still occurring, and coming up, we've still got loads of players coming into the last year of their contract. So I think this is really a situation where Arsenal needs to be managed better because we're losing our most valuable assets for nothing, and this is having a material effect on the pitch, on the players that we can afford to put out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at, if you compare us to Liverpool as an example, you know, one of the or Chelsea, you know, one of the main reasons that their net spend over recent seasons is so low, you know, is not because they've been selling loads of players for massive fees, but they've had one or two players which they've sold for astronomical amounts of money. You know, you look at when Liverpool sold Coutinho to Barcelona, you know, in total it was nearly 150 million.
Yeah.
You know, when Chelsea sold Hazard, he only had 1 year left on his contract. And again, they sold him for about 100 million, 100 to 120 with add-ons.
Liverpool sold Brewster this year for 30 million.
Exactly. And, you know, this is a youngster, unproven, like finally scored a few goals in the Championship. But to an extent, anyone can score a few goals in the Championship. He wasn't proven in the Premier League. And I know Sheffield United are obviously struggling, but when they spend that amount of money, so record signing, you know, they want someone who can make an impact. They don't want a kid who can come on for 5 minutes. Yeah, I think that's one of the key issues with Arsenal. You know, when we are selling our players, we're letting them run down their contracts. And the issue that's causing is either they're demanding so much money when it comes around to renewing their contract, or we're letting them go for free. And, you know, I do agree, it's not acceptable, really. There are a lot of faults at the board level. You know, they're not doing their job as good as they could be ultimately. And it is having a detrimental impact on the club. You know, we're not getting the full value that we could get for our players if we were to sell them, if they had, you know, long-term contracts. We're not doing what clubs like Man United and Tottenham do, where, you know, as an example for Man United, with all their players, they insert So as an example, they'll give him a 5-year contract, and then they'll insert an additional year, which Man United have the option to trigger. So what that means is when the player goes into the final year of their contract, technically they're not in the final year of their contract because Man United can just trigger that extension. And so it gives Man United more bargaining power when it comes round to the contract negotiating.
Yeah.
You also look at Tottenham. For Tottenham, they sign their players to long-term deals. They make sure that their key players are on 4 or 5-year contracts, so they're never getting to the last year of their contract, and Tottenham are never being put in a tough situation where they have to negotiate a ridiculous salary for whatever player. Whereas you compare that to Arsenal, and it's a complete contrast. I do think it is a bit of a mess at this moment in time at board level, and these key individuals who are involved in contract negotiations, and it does need to be sorted out. Because, this is happening time and time again, and it's not really acceptable for a club of Arsenal's stature. More is needed, quite simply.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing else really to say. This is not how you run a business. This is not how you make money. We've been letting this go on for far too long. I'm hoping that some changes at the board level can kind of change our policy towards this, but we've got a few players entering the final year of their contract. I think Lacazette is about to enter it at the end of the year. I think it's the same with El Neni. These are valuable players with Premier League experience who should be going for a lot of money, who it looks like aren't going to be going for a lot of money. So, this is really something which Arsenal need to fix. But I think for now, it's goodbye, Mesut. Thank you for everything which you've given to the club, for what you've given to the fans. I think it was time to move on. But I think we wish you all the best during your new career at Fenerbahce.
Yeah, exactly. Great player, definitely will be missed. And thank you for the memories, quite simply.
Yeah. If you liked our video, guys, please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. We'll be back again on Tuesday to cover Arsenal's next game against Southampton. Hopefully that goes better than our last game against Southampton. But until then, Mesut, wish you the best, and everyone else, we will catch you very soon. Goodbye.